that life is worthwhile, and the absence of negative feelings. Interestingly, about 50% of our happiness is determined genetically. We have kind of this happiness set point. And the other 10% are controlled by circumstances, although Frankel's quote would lead you to believe we have a lot to say about that too. But 40% is under your control. In the social sciences, I will tell you, 40%, when you can explain 40% of the variability in a phenomenon, you have explained an enormous amount. Because human behavior is very complex, and it's rare that we find one thing that can explain a whole lot of variability in a particular phenomenon. But you control 40% of your happiness. That's very good news. So we know positive emotions are linked to reduced mortality, reduced morbidity, and longevity. For those of you who may not know, mortality means death. Think mortal, death. Morbidity is sickness or illness, so you reduce death rates, you reduce sickness, and you increase longevity, how long you're going to live. How cool is that? Positive emotions, who'd have thought it? But there is, there's a scientific basis for thinking this now. So here's some kind of cool longevity studies that link positive emotion and living longer. One is called the English Longitudinal Study of Aging. And they had about 11,000 men and women in Britain. They were all 50 years old or older. And they divided them into 4 groups that self-reported their happiness. And then they looked at these groups 7 years later. And in the least happy group, 20% of the people were dead 7 years later. In the most happy group, only 6% had died. Now, in the most happy group, so you can see, that's almost like what? More than 3 times the rate of death in the least happy group as compared to the happy group. Clearly has an impact on mortality. But interestingly, these people in the most happy group, they were more likely to be married, well-educated, more wealth, and they were less likely to have serious illness. So there were lots of other associations as well. But when you controlled for those factors, right? In other words, if you somehow made the groups even with those factors, the death risk was still 28% less in the happiest group compared to the least happy group. So those factors, being married, well-educated, wealthy, still did not outweigh the factor of happiness in terms of mortality rates in that group. Then there was another study called the Nun Study that's, well, I don't know if it's called the Nun Study. I call it the Nun Study because they studied a bunch of nuns who wrote essays. And these nuns were 22 years old, and they wrote autobiographical essays when they entered the convent. And they content analyzed these essays 60 years later, roughly 60 years later. And what they found was that for those who expressed positive emotion or had positive emotional words in their essays, those nuns lived 9.4 to 10.7 years longer than the nuns who did not include that in their essays, which I think is fascinating. That's a long time. I mean, how many of us would like to have another 9 or 10 years? I know I would. So those are some of the studies, the kinds of studies that we use to see the links between longevity and happiness. So let's now look at, kind of revisit cardiovascular disease, because if stress can cause it or contribute to it, then maybe happiness can have an impact on it as well, you would think. So, in fact, we do know that happiness does reduce cardiovascular disease and events. Psychological well-being, if you report a sense of psychological well-being, that decreases the likelihood of heart attacks, stroke, and other cardiac events. And it turns out that optimism is the emotion most strongly associated with the reduced risk of cardiac events. So there's a joke that in this literature that says people who are optimistic are wrong more often, but they're happier. And which would you rather be, happy or right? You get to choose. Another thing that reduces cardiovascular disease is engaging in meaningful activity. We know this, there's research that demonstrates this. And we're trying to understand how it works. We think that maybe these positive feelings that people have override negative ones. And that maybe as a result, your self-care, your lifestyle improves, your habits improve. Maybe it is that happier people are more resilient or more flexible. They might be better able to cope. Maybe if you're happier, you have more stress-free moments and you just have more time to regenerate, relax, even have a sound night's sleep, all of which contribute to good health. If we look at the impact of positive emotions on diabetes, there have been 3 measures associated with improved outcomes in diabetes in terms of emotions. One is the sense of well-being. Another is positive affect, which is feelings of hope, happiness, joy, that kind of thing. And then resilience, the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. And resilience is a really new and interesting area of research because so often we look at what's wrong in a picture and study the things that are going wrong. But people who study resilience look at what's going right in a situation. And they ask, how are those factors, the things that are going well, making a difference? And I want to give you an example of this. In one of my classes the other day, we were looking at differences in health between neighborhoods in Louisville, Kentucky. And of course, the differences could be explained by poverty, pretty much, and socioeconomic status. And so I was asking my students, well, look at these pictures of what's going on in, the upper crust areas of Louisville, and look at what's happening in the poorer areas of Louisville. And so we were looking at all the things that were kind of going wrong. And somebody said, but wait a minute, in the lower SES areas of Louisville, those people look like they're together. They're in neighborhoods, and they're together, and they're doing things together. They're cooking together. They're sitting outside together watching their children. They're looking out for one another, and making sure people are in at night, and this kind of thing. And I thought, you're right. That's an example of looking at resiliency. What's good about what's going on, and how can you build on that strength? And it's a very strong area of research, and as it turns out, it's a lot to do with our health and happiness. So the outcomes of these 3 measures of positive emotion are, for people with diabetes, longer life, better health, and people tend to take better care of themselves as a result, which is really important in diabetes. And they adhere to a healthy diet and exercise. They have lower blood sugar rates, and they also have lower death rates, as it turns out. So, it also, even though happiness seems like it's kind of a nebulous thing, it turns out we can measure our happiness. And scholars and researchers, scientists have all kinds of ways to do that. And if you're inclined, take this little test and see how happy you are. And here's what you do. You look at, there's a scale up there, strongly disagree is 1, strongly agree is 7, okay? And everywhere in between, and you can see what those are. And then those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 statements. Just number your paper 1, 5. And then rate each one of those statements. The first one is, in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. How would you rate that on a scale of 1 to 7? Where 7 is strongly agree, and 1 is strongly disagree. Okay, in most ways, my life is close to ideal. The second one, the conditions of my life are excellent. Conditions of my life are excellent. Number 3, I am satisfied with my life. What do you think? Number 4, so far I have gotten the important things I want in life. And then finally 5, if I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing. And then add up those 5 numbers and see what you get. And this is something scholars do. It's a very little mini sort of survey, but I wanted to show you one way that people actually attempt to measure happiness. So this is the interpretation of your scores if you took the test. You can see that higher numbers are happier than lower numbers. And if you have lower numbers, you may want to think about what you might do to improve on the happiness scale. But that's the kind of thing that researchers do. And some are much longer and more detailed, but in general, that's kind of how these surveys look. So, what makes us happy? one thing we know is we know that it's a myth that more wealth and material goods make us happy. That is a myth, believe it or not. Up to the point where you are having your needs met. In other words, you have enough food, enough clothing, shelter, transportation, those kinds of things. You're getting your needs met. And generally speaking, that's said to be around $75,000 a year, maybe a little less. Up to that point, more money does help. It eases stress. But after that point, not so much. Not so much. It turns out more money does not bring more happiness. There are some studies that say more money brings more life satisfaction, but not more happiness. I'm not really sure how to distinguish those. But other additional studies have been done, and now we have there's an international study that spanned 5 continents, and from people at all kinds of different economic levels. And what it found was that higher rates of economic growth in any of those countries and continents do not make us happier as a people. In the U.S., it's a real paradox because for the past 50 years, our rates of economic growth have been completely on the rise. And yet, as a people, we are not happier. So what is wrong with that picture? I have noted here as a sidebar, then why are so many of our policies driven to promote economic growth? Don't we want to be happy? Do we want to be happy? Do we want to be rich? Do we want to be both? But I'm thinking, maybe that shouldn't be a sidebar. Maybe that should be the whole point, or one very large point, which is why are so many of our policies driven by economic growth when we know that the rate of economic growth doesn't make us happier as a people? There are many other things that do. So I'll leave you to think about that, but I think it's a very important question. Just for fun, I will add in, some people imagine that children will make them happy, and of course, I'm a mom, I have kids, my kids do make me happy. However, raising children, as many of you know, is very demanding, and in fact, it turns out our levels of happiness really kind of plummet as we're raising our kids. Nobody had it. So it turns out, and it gets better though, because when your kids leave the nest, you actually, turns out your happiness starts to go up. So if you're worried that your mom and dad are at home pining for you, you can maybe let that one go because they may not be. Anyway, children are a blessing. We're all happy to have them. However, they do, studies indicate they affect our happiness in ways we might not expect. There's kind of a funny study that mothers reported enjoying watching TV, exercising, talking to a friend, I don't know how many other activities more than they enjoyed being with their kids. Now, I'm not sure what that says. I'm not sure if all moms feel that way. It's not that we don't love our kids, but, you know, it's a demanding task at times. The other thing that might be interesting to know is that we don't get less happy as we age. Up to a certain age, up to about maybe 85, especially if our health is good. In fact, we tend to get happier. We tend to, I don't know if we have less stress or we just perceive it differently, but happiness ratings tend to improve with people in late adulthood, which I think is kind of cool. So, how do you get happy? How do you get happy? Because it's important. It's important to your health. It's important to your ability to live a life, to have a life well lived. Well, the good news is you don't need to wait till life is perfect. You don't need to wait till you're sitting on a beach, sipping that drink, and the sun is out, and you don't have to wait for that. There are a lot of roads to happiness, and some of them that have been studied are, these 3 in particular, feeling good, which is just pleasure. Doing things because they feel good, they're pleasurable, you enjoy them. Another one is engaging fully. It's sometimes called flow. Have you ever been in that moment where you're doing something and something else distracts you and you realize, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for like 30 minutes, and you lose track of time, you lose track of where you are, and you're really fully engaged in what you're doing. flow. And it's a route to happiness. And the third one is doing good, which means doing something meaningful outside of yourself. All of these are demonstrated ways of paths to being happy. Now there are individual differences, and each individual may need more of one and a little less of another, but they're all important in terms of your happiness. Recent work is now looking into, in addition to those routes, being present in the moment. There was an interesting study done that looked at people, about 2,200 people, on a phone app. And every once in a while they checked in with these people through the phone app to see, what were you thinking about? What are you doing? And as it turned out, about 50% of the time, people were not focused on the thing that they were doing, or they were not focused on what was going on around them. This is not a comforting thought for someone who's giving a talk, or a professor who's giving a lecture, but it's informative. And it means we have to work harder. Anyway, but think about it, and so think about it, that's true for you. About 50% of the time, we're engaged in things that don't have anything to do with what's going on around us. We're thinking like, oh my gosh, I wonder what am I going to have to eat when I get home, and man, I hope it's not snowing because I don't want to clean up the car when I get out of here, and geez, how much longer should we talk, and all of these things, not in the present moment. Those don't make you happy, as it turns out. The happiest people tend to be experiencing things in the moment. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard, are beginning to hear more about mindfulness and presence and being in the moment. Because they're big contributors to happiness, and it's a very vital and growing field of research in health. We're beginning to think of mindfulness as a key element to happiness. And by mindfulness, I mean the practice of purposely focusing your attention on the present moment and accepting it without judgment. Just saying, this is it, this is what's happening, I notice it, I let it go. Now, this may involve meditation, something called mindfulness meditation. That, I want to say, is not a religion. Mindfulness meditation is not a religion, it's not a religious practice. You can be religious and do it, you can be non-religious and do it, but it's not a religion or a religious practice. It is the antithesis of multitasking. When you're meditating and doing mindfulness meditation, you are working very hard. Well, you're not working very hard. You shouldn't be working very hard at all. You are simply in a state of paying attention to what's going on in the moment. And sometimes you start out by paying attention to your breathing, noticing your breathing. Whatever thoughts come into your head, you kind of let them go, you notice them and let them go. If you're not practiced in meditation and you begin to try that, it can be a real exercise in frustration, because you'll be amazed at how quickly your mind is always chattering, always talking to you, always saying, I hope it's not snowing, I hope that they save me something to eat at home, I hope that there's nothing to test tomorrow, I hope that, and your mind is chattering so much that if your mind were a roommate, it would drive you crazy, because it never shuts up, right? And so there needs to be a space where you can quiet that so you can think, right? Not this chatter, this incessant chatter. And mindfulness meditation helps you do that. As it turns out, multitasking is probably not a very good thing for us to do, because when you do multitasking, you're really not fully engaged in any of the things you're doing. You're not enjoying it and being aware of it. And so it's not very productive. The health benefits of mindfulness, we are finding a ton of health benefits to mindfulness and meditation. There are physical and psychological well-being benefits like crazy. Positive changes in health attitudes and health behaviors. We know that it affects heart disease, stress, gastrointestinal health, blood pressure, chronic pain, sleep problems, and on and on and on. It's also really useful in the treatment of depression. It helps with relapse of people who practice mindfulness meditation have a lot fewer relapses than people who don't practice it. So it's something to pay attention to and consider. Some of the other things mindfulness practices also support are these other paths to happiness. And these are all things that can contribute to your happiness and sense of well-being. Savoring pleasure is one. And it often means slowing down and being in the moment. Full engagement in activities. You're there. You're paying attention to what you're doing. Even if it's just washing the dishes in the sink and noticing that the water is warm and sudsy and the dishes are clean and it feels good. Gratitude. We are doing a lot more research on gratitude and the power of gratitude to affect our sense of health and well-being. There's a lot out there on gratitude, and we have science that says it affects our health and well-being. Mindfulness also promotes a greater capacity to deal with adverse events, less preoccupation with worry or regret, thinking about the past, and it allows for more focus on deep connections with others, which at the end of the day, it turns out, is a really important component of happiness, deep connections with others. And I think this is the most interesting thing of all. Mindfulness practices can actually change your brain. We have evidence that it can change the structure and function of your brain. And I mentioned it's used in the treatment of depression, but also for anxiety, for OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and other issues. And so what that means is it's a really useful tool for when life gets tough. And it's also a really great maintenance tool to keep you healthy. And anybody can learn it. It's not something you are genetically endowed with. You can learn it if you want to. So, is a life well lived accomplished by being happy and avoiding stress? Well, yes, but that's not all. Scholars across disciplines say we need meaning. We need purpose. We need to focus on concerns outside of ourselves. In addition to our own happiness, we need to feel like our life has a purpose. And studies link emotional and physical well-being to purpose. There's lots of work that demonstrates that people with a purpose are healthier, they live longer, and they live happier. Purpose can be things like helping others, it can be volunteering, it can even be how we spend our money. And again, there are studies on all of those that demonstrate that those kinds of activities contribute to our health and well-being. So pursuing pleasure and purpose are both important. The inner life and the outer life, they're both important. And I would encourage you to experiment with your own life and see what the balance is that will work for you. So beyond the individual then, what happens when people become happier? I think this is really interesting. When you are happier, people around you are happier. You're like, there's just like this invisible connection that we all have, but it's real, and it matters. When you get happier, your friends around you are 25% more likely to become happier. When you get happier, your next door neighbor's chances of happiness increase by 34%. These are studies that demonstrate this. It improves personal relationships. Mindfulness, going back to mindfulness, is linked to happiness, so mindfulness is linked to happier, more resilient relationships. In the workplace, happiness and mindfulness affect performance. There's lots of data on this, and companies are beginning to pay attention. Corporations are beginning to pay attention. Again, lest you think this is just some kumbaya kind of fluff, companies like Google, Ford Motor, General Mills, they are trying out mindfulness, coaching, all these kinds of things because some leaders, some really good leaders, are aware of the importance of this and the impact it can have on not only people's well-being, but on the bottom line of the company. It's good business to do this, as well as morally a good thing to do. And universities increasingly are doing this. Universities like Brown, Berkeley, Vanderbilt, Penn, NYU, and also EMU. Now, I think my understanding is EMU, we have some things at HAPS that address mindfulness and stress reduction. And those are all terrific things. But I think more and more universities are moving to courses in mindfulness, courses in health and happiness, and this whole mind-body connection, and helping our students become educated citizens and doing something that will help their own inner life as well as improve the lives of people in the world around them. So it's all good. So a better world, a life well lived, how does that happen? Well, I think we have to take happiness seriously. We have to rethink what we know. There's this paradox. We know there's this paradox that economic growth does not make us happier, and yet we keep striving for it. What's up with that? You are all of voting age. I hope you will all be registered to vote, and I hope you will examine your values and align your values with candidates whose policies reflect those values, who reflect your commitment to making yourself happier and the world around you happier. Health, happiness, and purpose go hand in hand with a life well lived. And we can take a few lessons from something called the Blue Zones. Anybody heard of the Blue Zones? Blue Zones? First heard about this, a guy named Dan Buter wrote a book called The Blue Zones. I heard him speaking at the Gerontological Society of America conference in Boston a couple years ago. And he's done research to find out where it is on Earth, where on Earth do people live the longest. And then he's trying to understand what is going on in those communities where people are living the longest. And it's all over the place. There's one in, one in California, it might be Loma Linda, not sure, don't quote me on that, but in Greece, in Italy, in Japan, Okinawa for sure is one. What's going on there? Where people are living, like there are more centenarians there than anywhere else in these blue zones. And it turns out there are about 9 factors that influence it, and I kind of summarized them, but they involve the factors that tend to be associated with their longevity have to do with diet, exercise, relieving stress, red wine, in moderation, purpose, spirituality, belonging, putting loved ones first, and hanging out together with people in your social network. Now, I think that list is interesting, not only for what it includes, but for what it doesn't include. Anybody notice what it doesn't include? Right? I mean, nowhere does it include climbing the social ladder, getting rich, acquiring material wealth, breaking your neck to, succeed, whatever that means. I think it's conspicuous for what it doesn't include, as much as for what it does include. And that may give us some clues also to a life well lived and what we want to do with our lives. So I'm going to leave you with a challenge. An economist named Richard Layard wrote a book called Happiness. It's very easy to read, and it's really interesting. Pick it up if it interests you. And he says, I can think of no nobler goal than to pursue the greatest happiness of all. And he doesn't mean like the greatest happiness there is. He means the greatest happiness for everyone. Each person counting. And there's an element in there of equality, because inequality actually makes us sick. Social inequality makes us sick. Financial inequality, economic inequality, it makes us sick. There is lots of data to support that. Again, that is one of the most robust findings in public health and social science. And when we begin to equalize the gap between the haves and the have-nots, we get healthier. We have less disease. We have longer life expectancy. It's really interesting and amazing, but it happens to be true. In third world countries, one of the most important things you can do to reduce infant mortality is teach mothers to read. It doesn't have to do with any high-tech medical and reduce gaps in inequality. And those are very important. So I would say finding your place in that pursuit, the pursuit of the greatest happiness for everyone, is a path to a life well lived, and I would encourage you to think long and hard and often about how you would like to achieve that.